So I'm Harold Annis, Master Gardener since 2011, and today we're going to talk about fall vegetable gardening. And first, we'll talk just a little bit about Tarrant Regional Water District. So the presentation is supported by our regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District, TRWD, maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet drinking water standards. For our communities, they also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, Keller, and to provide water conservation programs to our community. Conservation is important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. That's why TRWD supports many programs that help save water through outdoor watering and gardening education. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler system check, where a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. TRWD also partners with organizations like the Tarrant County Master Gardeners and the AgriLife Extension Service to provide educational programs like this one. Be sure to check out SaveTarrantWater.com and sign up for the free services. So today we'll talk about some essential elements. Actually, we could talk probably 3 or 4 hours or more, or a whole semester on these elements, or a whole semester for each one of these elements. But we're going to do it in about an hour here, so bear with me. Some of the stuff will be a little sketchy, but I hope to get the point across that you can garden and you can have success in North Texas. So this is a picture of my garden. So this is probably more than most people have. It's 1/4 of an acre, 10,000 square feet. And this is a shot in the spring when everything is just starting to grow. The columns in the background are tomato cages with frost cloth around them. So that helps to mitigate the cold weather in the spring. So yesterday I went out and picked some vegetables, and here's a picture of most of them, not all, but most of them. So there's a wide variety of vegetables, and this is actually in South Lake, so not far from Keller. The soil is great, and it's hot there just like it is in Keller. So here's probably the more, this is at Grapevine Heritage Elementary School, as opposed to the Keller Heritage Elementary School. I had one of my volunteers go there one day and call me and said he couldn't find me. But anyway, Grapevine Elementary School, and this is more common, probably a more doable approach for the city garden. These beds are made out of cedar, western red cedar, and we fill them with a dairy mix from a local supplier. Here's another option if you have some trouble or you have aging parents or other folks in your family that can't really stand or stoop. These are at our Resource Connection demonstration garden in South Tarrant County. So that's some ideas, and if you want to pursue those, then you may give me a call or ask a question on Saturday, and we can probably get you an answer of some plans or more ideas about that. Just note that if you do something like this, that it's going to take a lot of water frequently. So this has a drip irrigation. So we're watering those daily with drip irrigation on a timer. So if you want to do something that is that thin, if you will, then you're going to have to do a little more watering. You can garden in pots, and this is at my house. And I say the bigger, the better. And you can see here from a 15-gallon, these tomatoes were all planted the same date. They're different kinds, so it's to give them some leeway there. But note that the 30-gallon pot really does a great job. The 20-gallon does a good job. The 15-gallon, I say that's a different variety, so it did a reasonable job also. So in my estimation, 15-gallon is about the smallest that you want to go if you're trying to grow tomatoes in pots. Yes, you can grow them in 5-gallon pots, but you may have to water them twice a day. And invariably, I don't get there twice a day. So the main thing is you want to do a garden plan. You know, I call December, January work when I'm doing a spring garden, or for a fall garden, you can do it right now. But if you plan the garden, and there's an elementary plan here to the right side of the screen, just what you're going to plant and the area that plant's going to take. So here's tomatoes that are taking up 4 square feet, an area 2 foot by 2 foot. So and that's really a minimal space for a tomato, unless it's a little patio tomato, then you can get away with less. Okay. Consider trellising on your garden. So if you really have a small space, then to put a trellis, if this is the north edge of this diagram, then I would put a trellis along there. And there I can train the tomatoes to go up the trellis. I can actually train cantaloupe to go up the trellis. And if you're brave, you could do watermelons, but you better have some strong pantyhose if you're doing watermelons. So the idea is you support the fruit, the bigger fruit, with a pantyhose tied to the trellis. Cucumbers will do fine. You can just train them up the trellis and they can hang, and if they fall off, then take them in and eat them. So Neil Sperry says you have to have a plan for your plantings, and you know each plant's mature size, and crowding kills. So if you want to kill a bunch of tomatoes, just put them real close together, or lettuce or anything else. Space, we all like our space. And today we like our space even more. And sun, okay, so this picture was not in Texas. It was Aberdeen, Washington at sunrise. So there it is, sun. You've got to have sun, and it takes sun for the photosynthesis to work. That's my last big word. Or you have to have artificial sun to make your plants grow. So what light requirements do we have? You know, different plants require different light volume, if you will, or hours of sunlight. And these, beans and broccoli, cantaloupe especially, all require like 6 to 8 hours a day for you to get a reasonable crop. If you have less sun than that, you might want to try some other vegetables, and some of these will work. I know broccoli is a little more forgiving than cantaloupe is, or potatoes. Potatoes are not very forgiving. They need the sun, and okra is definitely not. Okay. And all of these, everything on this sheet, I grow or have grown in South Lake, Texas. So it can be done. So if you have a little challenge here, you may have a little shade. And I moved from a house that had it was a small lot and it had 30 oak trees. And for 7 years, I planted things. And I never got one tomato because the only sunshine was on my way. So don't kick yourself if it doesn't work in the shade. Now here's some vegetables that do a little better with less sun. So and note that with shoots or shoots. So here you've got some beets and spinach. They all do well with maybe 4 hours of sun. Also, these are some of the vegetables that we use in the school garden because they typically I can plant, or the children can plant in September, or plant in February, March, and they can harvest in the same school year. So if you're trying to do a school garden, then my idea is that you want the children that planted it to harvest it in the same school year. So they have short memory sometimes and they're anxious. So that's where the radishes come in handy. You plant some radishes and they get immediate, next month, a little reward. Brussels sprouts take a little longer, okay? So typically I will plant Brussels sprouts in my own garden in September, and I may pick them in February or March. So patience is in. Probably not a good one for school garden. Okay, so we talked about maturity rates. There's several. So again, this is good candidates for a school garden. It's good candidates if you're working with your children, trying to do a garden in the backyard, because again, they will get immediate results. If you're a newcomer to Texas and starting the garden, then these are nice ones to start with because you'll have immediate success, and you'll be giving yourself high fives and success stories. Okay. Yeah, I think all of those we could plant in school gardens. The beets, maybe, they're not too excited about beets, so, nor turnips, but occasionally you find a child that is. Maturity rates, okay, so some things take a little longer, and again, if you're, in Texas, we're always fighting between the last frost and the 90-degree temperatures, or we're fighting from the 90-degree temperature to the first frost in the fall. So nice thing about some of these are that you can plant them in September and they will, they're hardy or partial hardy. Broccoli will withstand the freeze down to about 25 degrees. Green onions will. Parsley, I'm not sure, not so much. Cabbage will. Carrots won't, or peppers won't. Carrots will. They're semi-hardy. Tomatoes definitely not, and okra and corn not. So there's some candidates here that you could plant in September, even October, and harvest even beyond the freeze. That's the good thing about that. I put cauliflower in this too. I think it showed up on the previous slide. And cauliflower is a great one to plant in the fall, not so much in the spring, because you plant it in February and it turns to 90 degrees, and the head of it wants to bolt and turn into flower. So it's not a very pretty product. So even longer maturity dates. We have some, again, we talked about Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, but in the fall, if you can plant it in September, October, and takes 90 days, then you're into maybe December or even January, and that's fine for most winters, unless we get one of those 19-degree winters or days in December. I think last year we got one in November, didn't we? And but there's things you can do to mitigate that, and we'll talk about just briefly at the end of the presentation. Sweet potatoes, I plant those in April or May and dig them in September or October, so they're really a pretty long maturity rate. Yes, you can dig them sooner than that for smaller potatoes. Okay, make one more statement here. Tomatoes, in the spring, I'll plant them in the ground. In the fall, I plant them in pots so that when it starts to freeze, I don't have to learn to like fried green tomatoes. I can move that pot into the greenhouse or into the garage for a couple of days until that frost is over and move them back outside. And that's typically the case. We get, that freeze comes in December, and it's 1 or 2 days, and then we have a nice warm Indian summer for the next 3 weeks. So if you're doing tomatoes in the fall, then just put them in pots. That's my recommendation. If you put them in the ground, use the smaller varieties. The little cherry tomatoes will develop, mature faster than the bigger varieties. Okay, plan your most successful garden ever by using crops that naturally thrive where you live, okay? That means plant seeds and plants that will survive in North Texas, okay? And we're going to go to a website here in just a second called Recommended Varieties for North Central Texas. So let's go back to Easy Gardening fact sheets, and we'll just do one of these. I think we'll do green beans. And just know that there's an alphabetical list, and it's 2 or 3 pages that is only about green beans. It gives you some soil prep, planting, and spacing, fertilizing, watering, insects that might affect them, and also some diseases and harvesting. So there you have a nice, concise document that will tell you how to grow green beans in Texas. So, and there's an alphabetical list with just about any kind of vegetable that you would want to grow in North Texas. Let's go back to the website here. Now, vegetable variety recommendations. And I found once I understood vegetable variety, I started having a much better success rate. So when I'm going to the store to buy vegetables, let's see, all right, I jumped ahead. I selected region B, North Central Texas. So that's going to give me vegetable selections for that region. And I'm going to select all vegetable varieties so that it gives me the complete list. And again, here's beans, bush beans. So it gives me these varieties will perform in North Central Texas. The numbers here are the days to maturity, okay? So if you've got tender crop beans in 54 days with good soil and good conditions, you should be picking beans. So that would be a good one for a school garden if it just takes a lot of beans to make enough to eat. So when you go to the store to buy bush beans, take this list with you and compare it with what's on the shelf. So if you go to the box store and you're looking at a big display of all kinds of seeds, and you get to the beans and you want to grow green beans, give preference to these. Now, if you have another green bean that you like and has performed well, add it to your personal list and go for it. So if you're going to buy plants, then usually we buy plants for onions, and here's some. This is my favorite, Texas Super Sweet 1015. It was developed by Texas A&M, and it does really well. You've got to give it a lot of nitrogen. Every month I give it nitrogen fertilizer. So that's probably enough for that. You can bring that up, print the entire list out, and take it with you when you go buy plants or seeds, and you'll have better success. Seeds are plants, and we've talked about recommended varieties and what do and just know that the Keller Library has a seed library in the library that you can go and check out seeds. Never have to return them, but you can have a process that you can save seeds and donate them to the seed library at Keller. And the YouTube here is a good reference if you want to go to that and see what the seed library is all about, or just visit the library and take a tour through it. The seeds are in these bins right here. It's a neat little deal. Okay, Neil Sperry says, choose only the best plants, trees, shrubs, turf grass, flowers, fruit trees, vegetables. Buy the healthiest specimens of the most recommended types. Do your homework ahead of time. Okay, so if you take the recommended varieties with you, then you're going to be ahead on the game with vegetables. There's other resources for your landscape plants and things like that that you can use. Especially tomatoes, I found that the variety makes a huge difference in the production. Okay, the season. When do I plant all these vegetables and which ones go first? I started gardening in South 1989. So at first, onions I planted, I probably planted them in March, and they were about the size of a golf ball. But I learned that you're supposed to plant them in January, okay? So plant them in January. Set your onions out on Martin Luther King Day. And this is kind of a busy chart, but know that, and I got this at Marshall Grain, I'm not trying to promote everything, but most garden centers have these guides, and there's a spring planting date right here, and those are good guidelines, okay? And there's a fall planting date, and those are good guidelines. But I like to point out here, it says you can plant tomatoes until May 12th. And if you do that, you will not get any tomatoes because once it gets to 90 degrees, the blooms do not set. So the blooms set between 70 and 90 degrees. So once June hits, then whatever's on the plant, so far as fruit, is probably all you're going to get for that spring crop. Some people are successful in carrying those over to the fall, those plants. I'm not. I have some other challenges in the soil. So if you can do that, fine. Otherwise, you can plant them in July and August in pots. So again, it's important when you plant. If you want to plant broccoli in the springtime, I use Valentine's Day. Potatoes, Valentine's Day. So, and that's what I learned from teaching the kids in the school garden, so they can remember Valentine's Day, that they're supposed to plant potatoes and broccoli. Most of the co-crops, potatoes are not potatoes, broccoli, cabbage, spinach, you can plant in February. And you can also plant it again in September and harvest in the fall. The fall crop for those crops is usually a lot better in quality when you pick it. When you're picking spinach and it's 90 degrees out, it tends to get holes and kind of droopy. So there you go, your planting guide. And if you can get one of those at a local feed store or seed store, use it. And also on the agri-horticulture website, each individual plant type had the recommended planting dates. Those planting dates on the website are a little bit broader in geography than this past one that I just showed you. However, the most important thing, just know that the soil temperature trumps the date. So if you're trying to plant corn, and here it is, corn, it wants at least 55 degrees. And that's, you can take a meat thermometer or whatever you have, your wife's meat oven thermometer, stick it in the dirt and find you a new home. But it needs to be 55 degrees. And the ideal temperature, so if you plant corn in August, and I frequently do, the ideal temperature for it to germinate is 95 degrees. So here at 55, it's going to take probably a week or two to germinate. Here at 95, it'll take about 3 days. I've had corn come up in 3 days, so in north central Texas. Okay, so that's the optimal germination. So these you can plant, just know that it's on these green dot days, just know that it's going to take longer for the vegetable to spring up through the soil. Soil, okay, do not compromise. So don't scrimp on your bed preparation. My clicker's not working. Okay, don't scrimp on bed preparation. The smaller the plant type, it's annual or perennial, flowers, vegetables, ground covers, anything, the more heroic the soil preparation should be. Okay, if I had to do it over with, that garden that I first showed you a picture of, it's about 10,000 square feet. I would have added at least 3 inches of compost over the entire garden. Now you can figure it out. That would be a lot of compost. A cubic yard will cover 100 square feet. So I would have had to have about 100 square yards. Is that right? 100 times 100 is 10,000. So it would have been a couple of $1,000. But I tell you, I would have been a lot ahead in production and fighting weeds and all other kinds of soil problems. Put 3 inches of compost on top of the soil and till it in as deep as you can. If you have to dig it with a shovel or a digging fork or a tiller, just go as deep as you can, till that in. Okay, so here's some essential elements for plant growth. And anytime we buy a bag of fertilizer, we're going to see nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. For example, 15, 5, 10, the numbers that you see on the bag would say that that bag is 15% of nitrogen, 5% phosphorus, and 10% potassium. Okay, these others are important elements, but they're minor elements. In the case of tomatoes setting blooms, these two are really important, calcium and magnesium. I put calcium in the bottom of the hole when I plant tomatoes. Okay, and here we're going to go. I'm sorry, I went backwards. How do I know what the soil needs? And here's how you do it. Soil test. There's a soil testing lab at Texas A&M. So write this down, http://soiltesting.tamu.edu. Okay, so, and they're open right now. We sent some soil tests in earlier in the year, like in late March, and got results back in about 10 days. Okay, so next slide. Here's, on that website, you can find this form, and it's a soil sample information form. I urge you to use this. Note that this form says a 20 right here in the upper right-hand corner. That means that it's good for this year. So that's the current form. So if you happen to have an old form and it says 19 or some other year, then don't use it, use this one. And I think probably the major difference there was they went to $12 from $10 on a basic kit or basic test. So you'd select the basic test. That gives you some basic requirements of nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium. So you fill it out. You can put in what you call your garden area, whether you're going to do it on your turf, your lawn, or your garden where you're growing tomatoes. You can be more specific. I'm going to grow corn, or I'm going to grow fescue, or I'm going to grow Bermuda grass, better yet. And then you'll get the results back, and they will send you a form that looks something like this. This happened to be for the Heritage Garden, the school garden. And note that I said that we used dairy mix, and phosphorus here is way out of bounds. So, and their recommendation down here is don't add any more phosphorus for the next 5 years. So you wouldn't buy any of those well-balanced fertilizers if you had a soil test like that. And it gives you a recommendation for nitrogen. It says here, actually for vegetables, it says add a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet every 4 to 6 weeks. And that's the difference in your vegetable garden. You really need to fertilize it about once a month, and you'll get more production out of it. Unlike your grass or your landscape beds that you're trying to maintain, and the more nitrogen you put on that lawn, the more you have to cut it. Well, that's what you want in your vegetable production. Okay, you're going to have to go out there and pick stuff. So here's some well-prepared soil, and that's potatoes, and they're mulched. The job is just not quite complete in that this side wasn't mulched yet, and I did that for just purpose of the picture. Okay. Now here's a December picture, or January. But when I plant tomatoes in the winter, I will add compost. So this is a 50-foot row, and I put in 10 wheelbarrows, 6 cubic feet. So I put 60 cubic feet. That's about a yard, 2 yards, almost 2 yards. There's 27 cubic feet in a yard in that one row. I make my own compost, so I have to spend $20 or $25 a yard. And then put it in as deep as it'll go. This makes a huge difference, and it'll make a big difference. This past year, I planted corn where the tomatoes were last year, right here, and then over 3 feet. And there was a foot difference in the height of the corn, just because one was benefiting from last year's compost. That was the only difference. Same seed, same date, everything. So compost, compost, compost. Okay. So here's where you make your seed bed. If you're going to plant seeds, then you want it smooth. This may be a little excessive. This is an engineer's garden, not mine. I'm a little bit more rustic than that. Okay. And here's where I said in the winter or in the spring when you're starting those plants, you can cover them up with row cover. I call this frost cloth, and you can buy it at the garden center in rolls of 50 or 100 feet, whatever they have. And there's different temperature ratings. But what you do, you cover it. Now you need to support some kind to keep the fabric off the plants, because you don't want the fabric laying on the plant and then a freeze comes, because then it doesn't give a lot of protection. So it's depending on some airspace in there. So you can cheat, if you will, on the planting dates. If you want to plant some green beans on the 1st of March instead of the 15th of March, you can cover them up and protect them from frost. So run with that. A couple of other hints. When I put the frost cloth around the tomato cages, I'm getting the frost protection, but I'm also getting wind protection, which I found in North Texas. That's probably more important. So I've really lost more plants due to wind whipping the little plants around than frost. So I really promote the use of frost cloth, and you can leave that on. So this past spring, I planted tomatoes on February 28th in the ground. Then I put the cages around them and the frost cloth, and they grew just fine. I can leave this on really until the plant is 3 foot, 4 foot tall, because it lets water in, it lets sun in. I took it off when the plants were about 3 foot tall. And the other benefit is if it happens to hail, then it gives you a little protection there. Mayfest, I lost a bunch of tomatoes, and that's again proved to me that you can't plant tomatoes in May, because I replanted some on May 5th or just after May 5th, and none of those produced tomatoes. Okay. Another little hint is cut those lower limbs off to keep the soil from splashing up on the leaves. That'll reduce your early blight when the lower leaves turn yellow, okay? That's the end of the presentation. So here's the summary if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Harold, and thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. If you would like to ask any questions about your vegetable gardening to Harold, you can do that. If you would like to type them into the chat right now, those are all being recorded in the question and answer box, and he will get back to you via email. We have your email addresses, and whoever asks a question will send a answer over to you after Harold takes a look at your question. Also, if you don't want to type it into that, you can email us at conservation@trwd.com. And if you have any type of questions about the vegetable gardening for Harold or about water conservation in general, we'd be happy to answer those questions as well, and we'll get back to you. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to stay connected with us, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter at safetarrantwater.com/sign-up, or if you just want to go to safetarrantwater.com and scroll to the bottom, you can sign up there. And then also, if you want to see about any future events like this one, you can go to safetarrantwater.com/events and look at our event calendar. So thank you so much for joining us. Please submit your questions and we'll get back to you, and have a wonderful day.